Hello Saints, welcome in for another midweek video. This week I want to talk about when a little becomes more than enough. The account of what we call the feeding of the 5,000 is recorded in all four Gospels. And to have an accurate view of this account, you should read all four accounts. We're not going to read that today. You know the story. Jesus has just heard of the execution of his cousin, John the Baptist. And he leaves to go away by himself. Now, I don't believe Jesus was overcome with grief, but there was some grieving taking place. And I think part of that grieving was due to the fact that John the Baptist had been executed because of Jesus, because of his preaching and being the forerunner for Jesus, the Lord. And so he gets away by himself, but he doesn't stay by himself very long. Pretty soon the crowds find out where he is and they begin to gravitate to where he is. And before long, there's anywhere from 12 to 15 to maybe even 20,000 people, 5,000 men, the scripture records. And Jesus looks at these people and he realizes they're hungry. They hadn't had anything to eat all day long. They're following him. And so he speaks to his disciples. He says, we need to give these folks something to eat. And Andrew, in the meantime, had met a young boy in the crowd, and in his conversation, he discovered that the young boy had a basket, and in that basket, he had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. I'm sure at the time, Andrew thought nothing of that little measly amount of food. So when Jesus begins saying that we need to feed these people, what do we have, or bring us what we have, he remembers this little boy. Now, whether they bought the food from the little boy or he gave it, I don't know. But they wound up with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and Jesus prayed over it, blessed it, and began to distribute it to the disciples as they went out into the crowd and they began to distribute this bread and this fish. Of course, nothing short of a miracle. It fed everyone, and they just kept pulling food out of their baskets and giving it to people. And when they were done, they picked up 12 basketfuls of fragments. They had leftovers. Now, whether or not they gave that to the little boy, I don't know. But there was more left than had been given in the beginning. Now, that's just a baby thumbnail of this story. But let's learn some lessons from this story. And I'm going to go through these briefly in our little short amount of time. First of all, Jesus' personal grief, it didn't stop him. It didn't prevent him from ministering to other people. A lot of times when we're going through things or we have suffered things, we get introverted. We get introspective. We worry about our own. We say, what about my needs? When's somebody going to do something for me? Well, Jesus didn't respond that way. He was genuinely moved with compassion toward this crowd of people. And he began to take whatever steps necessary to minister to their needs. And so the lesson here is the best way out of your own hurting circumstances, whenever you're hurting, whenever you've got an issue, is to extend a hand of mercy to somebody else. It's the best way in the world. If you're going through a tough time, you're going through a down time, find somebody you can do something for. Just extend a hand of mercy. Another thing is that Jesus didn't abdicate the responsibility of feeding these people. You know, he didn't say, well, don't bother me, I'm on vacation. I'm over here grieving my cousin. And the disciples, they kind of had an attitude, does he expect us to drain our treasury and just to feed these ungrateful tag-alongs? They didn't really like the idea of spending all of their money going into town and buying food. But Jesus wasn't going to let that go. And so he started the miracle. This is another lesson. Jesus started this miracle with what he had. He didn't worry about what he didn't have. He didn't wait for God to drop a food cloud on them. He didn't wait for God to rain hamburgers down on the crowd. He took what he had in his hands, which had been given by this young boy, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So when we see an opportunity, we need to start with what we have in our hands. I know it's easy to get frustrated by what we don't have in our hands, but start with what you do have in your hands and see what God does with it. Another thing, even in the midst of performing this miracle that's so grand, all four Gospels recorded, Jesus still operated in an orderly fashion. He organized the people in groups of hundreds and groups of 50s, and he delegated the disciples accordingly. In other words, there were no theatrics necessary in this miracle. He didn't need to showboat. He didn't need to create an image. He didn't need to make the news. He just did it in an orderly fashion. Another very important thing, this regards us, is that Jesus delegated the mission. Now, we know he probably could have went through the crowd himself and fed all those people himself. Of course, it would have taken a while, but he didn't do that. He delegated it to his disciples. He said, here, go feed those people. The disciples then began to mingle among the people throughout the crowd, and they distributed God's provision that had been given to them. Imagine them doing this all the while watching before their very eyes this miracle of food being produced over and over again, and in the baskets or whatever containers they were carrying seemingly never would empty. They just kept producing food. I'm sure their eyes got larger and larger. Another lesson is that Andrew brought the bread and the fish to Jesus even though he thought it was too small. Now, many of us needs to hear this. Many times we think what we have to bring to Jesus is too small, too insignificant, too unimportant, and so we don't bother. We think somebody else has something better. Whatever you got, you bring it to him. Whatever you have in your hand, you bring it to him. Our brother Jim Newsom used to love to say, don't underestimate the significance of your little, because God can use your little. What Andrew saw as little, Jesus saw as potential. What God sees, what you see as little in your hands, God sees as great potential. And Jesus doesn't need our assessment of the seed, of the thing he has placed in our hand. He just needs us to release it. He just needs us to get it out of our hands into a place of service. And finally, a lesson is that God provides even in the desolate place. This was a desolate place. This was a desert. There was nothing there. They had no food. I mean, where is it going to come from? In the midst of your desolate place, in the midst of your difficulty, in the midst of where you think you can't even see God, he's so far beyond the horizon, God provides, even in the desolate place. He shows himself mighty when we see no way of escape. The times that you have been seemingly backed into a corner, the times when the walls are caving in and falling in around you, the time when you see no way of escape from your circumstances, from your situation, those are the times that God shows himself the mightiest and the strongest. Do you know why? Because it's in those times we get out of the way. It's in those times we stop trying to fix everything ourselves, and we just say to God, I can't do it. I don't have anything left. You have to do it. The lesson for this whole story is this: give God what you have. You say, well, what I have isn't much. It doesn't have to be much. The fact is, it's more than you think it is. Give God what you have, and then you'll have what he has. That's the way it works, saints, because God provides always. Go read the four Gospels and find this account of this feeding of the 5,000 and see what you see what lessons you see that we didn't cover today. And that will give you the ability and the unction to go out there into society and act like somebody. Good day.